Hello, welcome back to the One Idjit's Thoughts On podcast. I am Paul Mackey. Well, the big week for work went well. It was a sunny day with a nice turnout and plenty of entertainment for the community members who came out to the park on Saturday. Meanwhile, this weekend, a bunch of us are heading down to the Twin Cities and heading out Saturday to the Minnesota Renaissance Festival. I was hoping that pushing it till later September would result in it being a cooler weekend, but I think it's still forecast to be near 80. The cool down happens immediately afterward, as far as I can tell with the forecast. 65 on Monday, won't help on Saturday. I may still wear my pseudo-authentic puffy shirt, but otherwise the plan for me is shorts and sandals. I'm not sure if I've mentioned it before, but I much prefer cold to hot. In any case, could the episode today be a hot one? Let's look at the Rockford Files Season One, Episode 19, Charlie Harris at Large, originally aired Valentine's Day, February 14th, 1975. That day of note I can get to in a minute, but interestingly, I will note that the day before, the Turkish Federated State of Cyprus was declared, and its independence was declared 8 years later in November of 1983, as I noted in my previous episode about WizKids. So, that day of note, the 14th of February, author P.G. Wodehouse, creator of Manservant Jeeves, passed away at age 93. After spending 3 weeks below first Murder on the Orient Express, then Young Frankenstein, The Towering Inferno returned to number 1 at the box office. Music number ones in the U.S., Linda Ronstadt hit number 1 with You're No Good, while in the U.K., Pilot continued to hold on to number 1 with their song January. Before I get to the summary, I will note that this is the last episode where John Thomas James got a writing credit. This was a story-by credit, and actually the writer of the teleplay Ezekiel Marco was in the episode as Gabe the Coroner. As I mentioned when I did the bio, John Thomas James was the pseudonym used by Roy Huggins as writer credit. I also mentioned Roy Huggins was forced off the show when he began writing new pages for episodes in production without having any of the rest of the staff involved. I do not know which episode that would have happened on. I'd assume since this was only a story-by credit on this episode, the process may have already been happening at this point. Huggins would continue to get created by co-credits with Stephen J. Cannell throughout the show and subsequent TV movies, but he was off the show from this point on.
This is Jim Rockford. At the tone, leave your name and message. I'll get back to you.
Hey, Jim, it's me, Susie Lewis from the laundromat. You said you were going to call, and it's been 2 weeks. What's wrong? You lose my number?
The brief summary. We open on a murder scene. A woman lies dead. Charlie Harris's wife. Word around town is he married her for her money. Now she's dead, and the cops want to speak with Charlie. A few days later, Rockford gets a call from Charlie, his old prison bunkmate, by the way, calling in favors, so he goes to Charlie's beachside hideout to meet with him. He says he's innocent. He was on the scene and found his wife dead. Stiff, he says. He touched the statue that was the weapon and called the paramedics, but then fled. He has an alibi, however, she has disappeared. She went by the name of Cassandra, and he'd been having an affair with her for about 6 weeks. He wants Rockford to find her. Jim says the best advice is to get with Beth Davenport and arrange to turn himself in. The police stop by Rockford's trailer and talk to him about Charlie Harris, but Jim isn't telling them anything new. When he was at San Quentin, Charlie was his cellmate for a couple of years, but he hasn't seen him lately. Charlie calls, saying he has worked out who Cassandra really is, Linda Bannister, young wife of Mr. Alfred Bannister, a high-powered trading executive. Charlie says he'll pay $30,000 from the inheritance if Jim can clear him. Rockford tails Linda Bannister to the beach and gets her to come back to what he calls his place, but is Charlie's hideout. It turns out Linda doesn't think he has a good case for innocence even with her as an alibi, and she isn't even sure if he didn't do it. Later, Linda Bannister goes to Jim's trailer. She is willing to help get him out of the country and set him up in South America. Later, some businessmen approach Jim and inform him he will be meeting with Alfred Bannister for lunch. Bannister says he knows about his wife's activities, and as long as they stay out of the papers, he's okay with it. Rockford should get off the case that involves Linda, or he will have Jim killed. The cops find the hideout, and Jim encounters them there. They arrest him. Later, when he is released, Linda Bannister shows up at the trailer and takes him away at gunpoint. They meet up with her friend, who has the money for relocating Charlie, but they are interrupted and assaulted. A car nearly runs Jim down, and he hops in another car and gives chase. When he stops the other car, the driver turns out to be Alfred Bannister, who Jim talks through the details with. Charlie's wife discovered the affair and was ready to go to court when the publicity-averse Bannister killed her to keep her quiet. In the end, the inheritance to Charlie is tied up, his wife had recently rewritten her will, and Jim goes away once again without a big payday. Who is? Joe Santos plays recurring character Sergeant Dennis Becker. Joseph John Maneri Jr. was born in Brooklyn on June 9, 1931, the same day that his father died. Originally, his mother sold olive oil, but eventually became a singer and nightclub owner and remarried to entertainer Daniel Santos. He was in the Army during the Korean War and attended Fordham University, playing football, later going on to play semi-pro before turning to acting. He worked for the railroad, trimming trees, and tending bar while honing his craft, and eventually was cast in the film Panic in Needle Park on recommendation of a buddy he played softball with, named Al Pacino. He performed in a few blaxploitation films, including Shaft's Big Score, before a long string of cop roles on television on shows like Police Story, Barnaby Jones, before landing the role of Sergeant Becker on the Rockford Files in 1974. He did reprise the role in the later Rockford TV movies, and in between, during the 80s, he had roles, some recurring, in shows like Trapper John M.D., The Greatest American Hero, Blue Thunder, Hill Street Blues, Hardcastle and McCormick, MacGyver, Murder, She Wrote, Quantum Leap, and in the 90s on NYPD Blue before the first Rockford movie in 1994. Following the Rockford Files movie series, Joe Santos played Angelo Giureppe in 7 episodes of Season 5 of The Sopranos. Joe Santos passed away in 2016 from complications of a heart attack he'd suffered 2 days previously. Artifactoids. Mrs. Bannister drives a 1975 Rolls-Royce Silver Shadow. The original model Silver Shadow 1 was produced from 1965 to 1980, joined by the Silver Shadow 2 from 1977 to 1980. Between the two models, the Silver Shadow was the most produced model in Rolls-Royce history. It had a V8 engine and 3-speed automatic transmission developed by General Motors. As you might expect, the Silver Shadow featured a luxury interior, with wool carpeting, real wood accents, and leather seating. There was air conditioning, power windows and locks, power steering, and power seats. The car came equipped with an 8-track stereo system. The original list price for his 1975 Silver Shadow was $38,750, which is over $225,000 today. In 1980, the Silver Shadow models were replaced by the Silver Spirit. Totally 70s. Hey, you look like a reasonably attractive random man with a camera on a beach. Let's go back to your place. What worked? For whatever reason, the whole episode felt just a little more California than many of the other episodes. Charlie's hideout is up the coast with ocean views behind him in some scenes. The car chases were all along coastal highways as well, which is sometimes but not always the case in this series. What didn't? Largely, setting aside, I would say this didn't work for me. Charlie didn't seem like an old friend, really, and I felt no real connection to his plight. If anything, I felt like he was arrogant in ordering Jim to do the favor. It was very confusing to me how Rockford was able to just be at the right section of the beach to run into Mrs. Bannister. Sure, he's an attractive guy, but they can't have known this setup was going to work. It just didn't feel like the pieces fell together for me, and the mystery was lacking with the killer revealed at the very end. So next time is the Rockford Files Season 1, Episode 20, The 4-Pound Brick. I have no idea what a 4-pound brick represents. Happy hunting! You've been listening to the One Idjit's Thoughts On podcast, produced by Paul Mackey in association with Nimlas Studios. Any short clips of audio from shows is included under fair use for commentary purposes, and copyright for that content remains with its original copyright holders. The theme song is Too Good by Jack Mangan and is used by his generous permission. One Idjit's Thoughts is produced under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License. You can find more episodes of this podcast and many other fine podcasts at nimlas.org. You can contact me by emailing idjitcastpodcast@gmail.com or commenting on episodes at nimlas.org. Okay, is it just me, or does Warner Anderson sound like he's a voice twin with Walter Cronkite?